we'll spend more time talking about something positive. Anytime at this point in the season when we can take away a positive, knowing that this Cardinals team is going down the tubes regardless, there are things that we can look for and ask, are they prescriptive for what this team could look like in 2024? And that's where we want to focus a lot of our attention. You know, it is a disappointing season, and I think we all know that by this point in time. But how many more podcasts can we do just talking about how mediocre this team has been in 2023? Like, we know it's been a lot of angst. Listen, I do a daily Cardinals podcast, right, for KMOV.com. And I'm Brenden Schaeffer. If you haven't seen or heard my Cardinals content before, glad that you're here on YouTube.com or Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Subscribe to Be Schaef Daily. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Like this video and drop your comments below, not only with your angst about the Cardinals season, because, again, we've done like 100 episodes about that this year. That's been the name of the game for the St. Louis Cardinals in 2023. But let's find the positive angle, right? And could it be Zack Thompson? Started the bullpen game today for the Cardinals, but really ended up being more of a spot starter, getting through 4 innings on about 60 pitches for the Cardinals in this one. And we saw the best version of Zack Thompson that I think we've ever seen in the big leagues for the Cardinals. And keep in mind, he's been a wipeout guy at times in the relief position. As a bullpen guy, he's been pretty good at times. Kind of tapered off earlier this season before he was sent down to Memphis to stretch out as a starter, and that didn't work out very well. The ERA was over 9 down there in AAA. But Zack Thompson is a former first-round pick, and he showed exactly why on Sunday for the Cardinals. 4 innings with 8 strikeouts. I saw the graphic, the most by a Cardinals left-handed starter in his second career start, which admittedly feels like one of those, if it's a Tuesday after Labor Day and it's not raining, but it's at least 78 degrees. Like, it's a little bit of a weird stat. But the bottom line is Zack Thompson struck out 8 dudes of the 12 outs that he recorded on Sunday, and I don't know if he was necessarily expected to go a full 4 innings. But we'll spend a lot of time tonight talking about his performance because it was pretty great. That's probably where we'll start and maybe where we'll finish. We'll talk a little bit about the disappointment of the offense, but I do want to spend time on Zack Thompson tonight because, like I mentioned, when we're talking about this Cardinals team over the course of the next couple of months, a lot of what we're going to be looking into is that conversation that John Mozeliak is having with the fan base a real one, where he says, we expect to contend in 2024. And Oli Marmol says, from the conversations I've had with everybody above me, my expectation as the manager of this team is that the Cardinals will contend in 2024. That means fixing the pitching staff, largely because of what they'll have to do in free agency in the trade market, but also there are elements of the guys that you have in-house. What can they do to mix into that situation for the Cardinals? And I don't think it's a negative, right, to see one of these young guys perform a little above his head and then, as a result, come into next spring training with maybe a little bit more of an eye on him for opportunity. Zack Thompson could be one of those guys. We know Matthew Liberatore is still mixing in. Maybe even Dakota Hudson is one of those guys, not a young guy, but a guy who isn't thought of all that highly, I think, within the organization, but could rise above his station and perhaps command some more attention going into spring. The reason that I have to preface it and say that's not a negative, Cardinals fans relax, is because I can already kind of see the gears turning within the fan base to say, oh boy, this will be how it happens. The Cardinals say they're going to sign multiple starters. They're going to address the rotation in free agency the way that they need to. They admit that it's going to have to happen, but then they're going to get suckered into it with these internal options because they'll have a couple of good starts, and then that's what's going to happen, and that's how 2024 is going to go off the rails too. They're going to give too many opportunities to these guys who are really not proven commodities in the Cardinals organization. I don't think that's the way to look at it. I think it's better to have better players. The more good players you have, the better off you're going to be. We have seen the way depth becomes really, really important. I think the Cardinals are going to spend. I don't know if they're going to spend to the level that fans expect or hope or need or crave, but they're going to have to spend some money on pitching. But is it going to be 3 free agent starting pitchers? It should be. Realistically, they should go in, and if they don't find a really sensible trade for a controllable pitcher like a Logan Gilbert or a Dylan Cease or a bona fide guy, if they don't find those asking prices to be to their liking, which I could see it going either way. I'm not in the Chicago White Sox front office. I'm in the front office for the Seattle Mariners, and I don't know what the asking price is going to be for those players. But if the Cardinals cannot find that trade, then yeah, I think they got to sign a number one. They got to sign a number two. And then they got to sign, kind of a middle-of-the-rotation guy, probably a shorter-term contract, just get you through. And then usher in the depth, right? The Liberators of the world, the Dakota Hudsons of the world, maybe the Zack Thompsons of the world, and see how those guys look in spring training, because we know someone's getting hurt, at least one someone, usually it's more, from that starting rotation is going to go down between February 1st and March 30th. I almost said March 31st, but then I remembered I don't know how many days are in March. It's not a leap thing. That's February. So I have no idea, but I'm just saying between that period of kind of ramp-up season, you're going to get some guys injured. So having depth is really important. This year, the Cardinals didn't have the answers that they needed in terms of depth. Matthew Liberatore, doesn't seem he was ready. Jake Woodford didn't really perform that well, got injured. Guys like Adam Wainwright come back, didn't pitch well. Miles Michaelis, slow start, World Baseball Classic. Steven Matz, slow start. Who knows why? Maybe not a clear situation off of his injury last year, just didn't ramp up in the way that he wanted, didn't have the confidence, didn't have the edge. Talked last night about the edge that Steven Matz has developed. You can go back and listen to that episode of B-Shape Daily. It was fun talking about Steven Matz and saying some good things. Maybe he's the most reliable, dependable starter the guys the Cardinals have right now going into next season. Michaelis is another example of that, but the numbers for Michaelis are actually a little better, at least in ERA terms. Michaelis has thrown more innings, and he didn't have to be demoted from the bullpen, or from the rotation, rather. So pick your poison on that one, but Steven Matz looking pretty good, but it's not going to be enough. Steven Matz is like a number 4, maybe a number 3 if things go really well. Miles Michaelis is like a number 3, maybe a number 2 if things go really well. The staff is going to need an ace. They're going to need meaningful additions in the offseason. But that doesn't mean you can't look internally and say, hey, who are the guys that are going to be that next wave? Because historically, when St. Louis Cardinals teams have really looked good, have really locked it in, they've had that next man up mentality where from Memphis, they've been able to pull guys up and not really miss a beat. And sometimes it's like the Brendan Donovans of the world where you go, I didn't even know about this guy. I guess he had that good Arizona Fall League, but who's this Brendan Donovan? Oh, he's just a dude? All right, that'll work. The years of the Memphis Mafia, guys just coming up one after the next. The Cardinals just have not had the benefit of that this year, where the guys that they have called upon, whether it be in the position player sphere or the pitching sphere, they have not been able to really answer the bell in a meaningful way. Guys like Fermin, Taylor Motter, pretty underwhelming with the performances from those guys. Pitching-wise, they had a whole group of guys that I feel like they were looking toward. Guillermo Zuniga, Wilking Rodriguez. Injury has really been the issue with the depth pitching. I guess when John Mozeliak talks about injury, maybe that's an area where we can kind of tip our cap and say, it's not really been all your mainstays that have been hurt, but you have definitely, everybody that you thought might be able to fill in for the guys when they get hurt, those are the guys that have actually gotten injured in 2023. So it's important to have depth, and I'm looking at Zack Thompson and circling that name right now because talk about a guy that could rise above his station relative to what we've seen from him this year. I think Zack Thompson is that. Zack Thompson could certainly mix in much more heavily than I think we currently expect, or certainly more than we expected him to do coming into today. I was in Oli Marmol's office on Sunday morning before the 1-0 loss to the Rockies at Busch Stadium, and he basically said, Zack Thompson's going to be the opener for the bullpen game today, and the game plan is, we'll let him go as long as the performance dictates. He does have a pitch count on him. Didn't name that pitch count hard and fast. I think it was probably a range, but there was certainly an upper limit, and Zack Thompson throwing 60 pitches in this game may have hit that upper limit because he performed so well that I don't think there was any world in which it was an expectation to get Zack Thompson through 4 innings in this game. But that's exactly what happened. 60 pitches on the dot, 39 of them strikes. Allowed 1 run, it was earned, and it was the picture-perfect example of small ball. It's the kind of stuff that Cardinals fans, man, I bet people are going to be in this YouTube comment section going, yep, that's what I want to see from this Cardinals team more often. And I don't even know if it's fair to count it as small ball when a guy doubles. But it was a double, and then they turned on the jets in terms of going back to Whitey ball. Immediately, the number 9 hole batter, I believe it was, lays down a bunt. It wasn't a great bunt. It was a 2-hopper back to Zack Thompson. But one of those deals where probably doesn't field a lot of bunts. How often do you see guys bunt anymore, right? So Zack Thompson, he gives like a cursory look to third, but really didn't have time. Had to wheel and throw to first base to get the sure out. And then a sacrifice fly by the next batter was the run, and it was the only run that was scored in the game. So you credit Colorado Rockies, man, for coming up with that small ball. I don't hold that against Zack Thompson, though. He gave up the double, and then after that, they just executed. They just executed in a situational hitting situation where you lay the bunt down and you just hit a fly ball deep enough to score a guy. Tyler O'Neill not in left field today. He was a DH. So you had Lars Nootbaar out there in left, and I wonder, O'Neill with a really strong arm, I wonder if O'Neill would have gotten him. But this was pretty moderately deep into left center field on the sac fly. Nootbaar tried to make a go of it. It wasn't going to happen for him. And so that run scores. It ends up being the only run. Like I said, though, I'm not holding that against Zack Thompson. Very good day. 4 innings pitched, 2 hits allowed. He allowed that run, walked 1 guy, and struck out 8 batters. ERA in St. Louis this year down to 4.29. And again, I'd said the ERA with Memphis was above 9. It's not true. It's 8.65 was ultimately the ERA for Zack Thompson down there. He just, I don't know. I wasn't watching any of these Memphis outings for Zack Thompson, but something ain't right. And he had walked 39 batters in 34 and a third innings. You talk about walking a guy every other inning. It's like, oh, that's not a very good ratio. He was walking more than a batter per inning in his outings with the Memphis Redbirds this year. I don't know. Would have to ask him about it, what it is that he was kind of experiencing down there. When he got sent down, that was kind of the bugaboo for him. He started off looking like a complete dude at the beginning of the year, kind of elevated himself into that go-to lefty for the Cardinal bullpen. And then from there, just kind of seemed to lose it. And walks were certainly a major part of what was plaguing him at the time in terms of Zack Thompson's effectiveness at the big league level. And so when they sent him down, they said, oh, it's to put him in the rotation for Memphis. They want to stretch him out to be a starter, which I get the sense wasn't really fair to Zack Thompson, and he might have probably thought it as well. That may be part of just the profound struggles that he had in the minor leagues. Like a lot of guys, if they're going to make you a starter, and I think there was a point at time where Oli Marmol or John Mozeliak or both of them have addressed this with the media since it happened, but there was a point in time where Zack Thompson, he comes into the season as a reliever, and Mo basically said, I think it was Mo that said it, but he basically said like, yeah, looking back on that, a lot of times guys want to know coming into a season if they're going to be asked to start or come out of the bullpen. And it's always better to err on the side of let's see what it looks like as a starter because it's hard to go back and do it the other way. So they basically told Zack Thompson coming into the full off season before 2023, like last November, October, like you're going to be a reliever next year. And so he didn't really prepare as though they were going to ask him to start because they weren't going to. And then middle of the season, I don't know, maybe there's a reason for it. Sometimes and fans may not like this, but sometimes I don't want to be too quick to jump on the team for mishandling a situation if there might be the potential to just ask about it and find out a little bit more at some point. Of course, the Cardinals going out on the road now, and so I won't be traveling for this road trip, and so it'll be a while going on vacation later this week as well. So it'll be a while before I get a chance to kind of dig back in. But if it's still a relevant topic, I might think to kind of circle back on it because I'm kind of curious as well how they view that when it comes to Zack Thompson. And, he would probably never throw anybody under the bus and say, oh, I really wish I had a more sensible opportunity if they wanted me to start. But it's tough to do after you've basically been a reliever all through spring training and that's your mindset. And then you're a reliever in the big league bullpen and then they're sending you down. I can recall kind of a little bit of inconsistency there where the Cardinals kind of described it that Zack Thompson was excited about the opportunity to get back as a starter. And from what I can remember, he was a little bit like, not what I expected sort of thing. Obviously, guys want to be at the big league level, make more money that way. Better for your career, better for everything. But long term, I did think, well, it might make sense to see what Zack Thompson can do because I am always of the mind that if a guy has the chops to maybe be able to start, you let him until he proves to you that he can't do it. Because a bona fide starting pitcher is always, always, always going to be more valuable to an MLB team than a bona fide relief pitcher. Always, every time, full stop. There is no exception to that rule. Like Felix Bautista, probably the best reliever in baseball this year. I've looked at his numbers recently for the Baltimore Jack Flaherty's, and Bautista's been completely ridiculous. But I just don't think there's any way that if you take a stud starter, he's not going to be more valuable than that guy. Although Bautista's been really good. 3.2 wins above replacement, an 0.85 ERA in 48 games with 30 saves. But again, if somebody's doing that every fifth day and they're doing it for 6 or 7 innings at a time, you're going to throw 200 innings instead of 60 or 70 innings. He's at 52. And it's just, you're going to be more impactful. So I'm always of the mind that, especially when you've got a first-round pick, a former first-rounder like Zack Thompson, taken out of University of Kentucky by the Cardinals, 19th overall in the 2019 draft, take a shot and see if the guy can start before you box him into a career as a reliever where inevitably, even if he is the best reliever in baseball, you're not going to get the same value from him as you would the 30th best starting pitcher in baseball. That's just like an estimate on a given year, but I would say that starting pitcher number 30 in WAR, probably better than reliever number 2 in WAR basically every year. Maybe there will be some outliers like a Felix Bautista season where his WAR is going to be higher than the 30th best starting pitcher this year, but generally that's kind of the way that I look at it. And here's an example of why. Maybe I've used a little bit of hyperbole here to describe the situation, but I'm looking at the FanGraph leaderboard for wins above replacement by pitchers this year, and Felix Bautista checks in with 2.7 WAR, which puts him 15th in baseball. So I said 30, maybe overshot it, but I would say that he's having an outlier relief pitcher season. And it's very possible that just because it's more difficult to accumulate WAR as a relief pitcher, if he has a bad game or two, it's going to impact him negatively. I would say he probably ends up outside the top 20. But for example, how good do you think Miles Michaelis has been for the Cardinals this year? You'd say, maybe a little bit of a disappointment below expectation. He ranks 16th in WAR among pitchers per FanGraphs at 2.6. Bautista is 2.7. So you could have a Miles Michaelis level pitcher who has been largely a disappointment in a lot of ways for the Cardinals rotation in terms of like his consistency this year. And yet he's one of the more valuable pitchers in baseball because he's a starter. So Michaelis, I won't say he's middle of the pack. Like he's definitely one of the 30 best starters, evidently. I mean, FanGraphs seems to think so, which is kind of crazy because his ERA and stuff like that doesn't suggest that that's true. But nevertheless, that kind of serves to prove my point where if Michaelis and Kyle Gibson and Jordan Montgomery and Sandy Alcantara, with the way he has really struggled this year, are all kind of in range on what Bautista brings, I'm always looking for my stud prospects to get every last opportunity to start before you box them into a relief role. The Cardinals have kind of done it backwards at times in the past. Like, eventually you kind of realize, okay, Genesis Cabrera probably doesn't have the temperament to be a starter. You figured that out as time goes on. Carlos Martinez, I said you want to let that thread play out back when C-Mart was with the Cardinals because he had demonstrated for like multiple years in a row the ability to be a frontline starter. If you don't believe me, go back and look. Rank it as it was relative to the rest of the league at the time, and he was one of the top 20 starters or whatever for a 3-year span. It was just, those were the numbers. Guys like Ryan Helsley, I wonder if that would ever be a way that they would go back on it. Jordan Hicks, obviously, they started him as a reliever because they're like, oh, let's give him to the big leagues. But now, 6 years later, he's not on the team anymore, and they never really did fully realize his potential up until the very end. I mean, as a closer, he certainly finally did hit on that potential and was able to net the Cardinals a couple of prospects as a result. But it's just like, what could it have been if they could have harnessed the ability to find Jordan Hicks in a rotation, throwing 100, instead of in the bullpen? And I know they tried it. Whether that was that last year or 2 years ago, they tried it there for a while, and it was like not really looking great at the big league level. But that was after years and years and years of him already pitching the bullpen and kind of developing and cementing who he already was as a pitcher, instead of developing him in a way that was like, hey, let's add a pitch, let you be a starter. They could have gone sinker and four seam and slider, and maybe they add something for Hicks to make him suitable as a starter. You really do need 3. And that's kind of what I want to talk about, though, with Zack Thompson, because he's been a guy who, good curveball, good fastball, electric. I mean, he triple-digit fastball at times. But what else can he show you? And the answer to that was the slider today, as every slider that he threw, I believe, and you'll hear this as we'll play some of the audio courtesy of Bally Sports Midwest, every slider he threw today was thrown for a swing and miss. Or every slider that was swung at was, the batter did not connect which is rather notable, I would think, when it comes to Zack Thompson. Is really his third pitch. I think he threw 9 of them, and he was electric with that slider, which helped him to the 8 strikeouts that he put together today. And suddenly it's a question of like, okay, if that's who he is and he's got 3 pitches working, does he need more than that to be a starter? Is that just a case where he found success because this was a lineup not really game playing to have to face him multiple times or face him beyond just, the top of the lineup, couple of innings worth? What was it that allowed him to dial in for the success? I think my inclination is to just give credit to Zack Thompson for the way that he performed today. But let's hear from Cardinals manager Oli Marmol, courtesy of Bally Sports Midwest, on his take of the situation as Zack Thompson, who was supposed to be the opener in a bullpen game, rock and roll for 4 innings, was absolutely gnarly. Despite the Cardinals' loss, he was a hard luck loser, but the stuff was really encouraging. If you're looking for what the 2024 roster could look like, you may look no further than Zack Thompson's name after what he did today, but how much is it prescriptive? You'll hear a little bit from Oli Marmol with his impressions of the outing.
When you look at what the possibility of outcomes could have been for Thompson today, how encouraged are you by how well it turned out?
Very encouraged. That was a really good outing for him. I mean, when we talk about what it looked like in AAA compared to what he just showed us there, he wasn't commanding his pitches. He threw everything for strikes, pounded the bottom of the zone, 1 walk, 8 punch-outs, had the curveball working for him. The slider looked really good, got a lot of swing and miss with that. That was impressive, probably the best we've seen him, so very encouraging, yeah.
On the slider, I know that was something that he talked about he's been working on. I think almost, not entirely sure, but I think every one of them that was swung on was a swing and miss today.
You're correct.
How important is that for him to be able to add that? I know it's also a pitch that gives him a different look in terms of velocity and also movement profile of his curveball and fastball.
Yeah, it's a different look, to your point, but it's also, think about when we broke spring training, we talked about if he's not landing his curveball, I mean, he's going to have to really just beat people with 1 pitch, which is his fastball. So it allows him, if he's not having a feel for the curveball, to be able to use something else to keep guys off balance. When he's got all of it working, we get an outing like we see here with 8 punch-outs just because you're having to protect quite a bit. So introducing that slider a little more is going to be important. He did a really nice job with it today, though.
So there's Cardinals manager Oli Marmol with the audio courtesy of Bally Sports Midwest, talking about the outing today by Zack Thompson. And you hear the conversation about that slider, which is, I think, really interesting because I kind of posed the question, does a third pitch represent enough of an off-balance element for Zack Thompson to say he can thrive as a starter? You just need to really have those 3. I don't know if it's long-term a yes to that, but certainly if he's as effective as he was today with everything, and he was really locked in, I think, with all 3 pitches, that's going to be really difficult to stop. You'd like to probably have more to fall back on because inevitably there are going to be days where you don't have 1 or maybe 2 of the weapons in your arsenal, and a lot of times you'd like to see a starter with 4 pitches, but 3 is kind of the minimum. The slider was effective for him, though. I mean, if you throw it and the only way that guys react to it is by swinging and missing it, that tells you something about the progress of that pitch. And like Oli said, it's just lights out, night and day, different from what they had seen from him in Memphis, where he's walking more guys than innings pitched. Like, that's not a way to really avail yourself in a competition for a rotation spot on any level. And it was just a completely different Zack Thompson day. Only 1 walk in the 4 innings that he had, gave up a couple of hits, and they just absolutely manufactured the run that they scored against him. So the 8 strikeouts, man, that plays. You talk about the Cardinals on their quest for swing and miss stuff from their guys they're looking to put into the rotation. I don't think you can look much farther than Zack Thompson to say, let's see what that looks like again. Continue to fine-tune so where the command is something he can be on top of with the fastball. Every pitcher is going to talk about fastball command is really the beginning and the end for what they're looking to do. You're not going to very often get very far unless the fastball is something that you can spot on a given day. Curveball is a weapon. Make the slider become a weapon as well. And you heard Lynn Worthy of the Post-Dispatch kind of asking too and referencing the different velocity in terms of you go from fastball to curveball, usually a slower curve, and then slider can be kind of that mid-tier velocity where that can be something that keeps hitters off balance. And when he's throwing it the way that he did and it has the movement that it does, it can just be a real weapon for him. and you just pick your spots to use those different pitches. Again, he only mixed it in 9 or 10 times. It wasn't like he was relying upon it heavily, but if you go slider 15 to 20%, and you can really lean on the fastball 50 to 60%, and the rest are curveballs, I think that's a winning mix for Zack Thompson, especially when he's commanding his arsenal the way that he did today. Like I said, there are going to be days where let's say you're not landing the curve, and he's not really a guy that has gone fastball slider a whole lot, you're going to probably have to just beat guys with your fastball in those days. But if you can get the slider to a point where it's a pitch you have confidence in, and if the curveball is not something that you can throw for strikes, you just can kind of show that on occasion to keep guys honest with the changes in velocity, but you can work off of the slider and kind of allow that to, whether it's tunneled off your fastball or however you want to approach it, that could be something that Zack Thompson, I think, can do with some effectiveness. I completely throw out the 8 ERA at Memphis. I really do, because I think there have been some unusual circumstances when it comes to Zack Thompson's season, and kind of one of those deals where we'll hear from this audio clip that we'll play courtesy of Bally Sports Midwest on Zack Thompson, hearing from Zack Thompson after his 4 solid innings on Sunday, referencing the weird season that he's had, and you'll hear he doesn't really push back on it. It's been a weird one, but he says, this is all happened for a reason, and it's kind of led to this, the opportunity that he now has with the Cardinals. And it seems like he is a guy with a very steady demeanor and has the chance to maybe make some things work for him. So let's go ahead and hear from Zack Thompson here. You'll hear Jim Hayes of Bally Sports Midwest asking the first question here of ZT, and we'll go from there with this from Zack Thompson from Sunday, as the Cardinals did fall 1-0, but Zack Thompson really not the reason for the loss in this one. Here is the Cardinals left-hander after the game.
Is working for you, because it looked like you had a lot of stuff working. Curveball was good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I was commanding the fastball, putting it to both sides of the plate, up and down, landing the curveball, getting the slider over the plate and then off, and they kept swinging at it.
When you're getting ahead in the counts, controlling counts, getting early strikes, is that a mental thing, or what's the difference between when that's going for you and when it's not?
Yeah, I'd say it's definitely a mental thing. It plays into it. Just carrying myself with confidence every pitch out there today, and attacking hitters, and if they beat me, they beat me.
It was kind of a weird season for you. Good early, then up and down a little bit. How good did it feel to go out there when they needed, a solid outing and give you 4 really good innings?
Yeah, it felt great. Like you said, it's been a really weird year, but it all happened for a reason, and this is the culmination of everything I learned from getting sent down, struggling down there, coming back, having some struggles out of the bullpen, and starting to put it together now.
Zack Thompson after the game, courtesy of Bally Sports Midwest. Cardinals lose 1-0, but as I mentioned, it wasn't because of Zack Thompson. The hard luck loser in every sense of the term goes 4 innings, which is more than they would have expected him to do. Had 8 strikeouts, had strikeouts on the curveball. Slider was a great swing and miss weapon for him, and it all starts with fastball command. What about Zack Thompson excites you Cardinals fans after you saw this kind of pleasant surprise in terms of his outing from Sunday? Drop your comments below in the YouTube comments section. I'm curious whether a game like that from a guy who does have a former top prospect, a former first-round pedigree, does that kind of change your mindset on, well, maybe this is a guy the Cardinals should give a long look to heading into next season? He's only 24 years old and doesn't necessarily seem to have a rotation spot moving forward. Remember, the reason that he was even getting the opener nod in the bullpen game today was because of the suspension for Miles Mikolas, 5-game suspension, and so basically it's just a 6-man rotation for 1 week. Everybody bumps back 1 day, gets an extra day of rest, and the bullpen handled Sunday's game. But Zack Thompson handling 4 of those innings kind of maybe makes you turn your head a little bit. They did send him back down to Memphis in order to prep for a potential future as a starting pitcher. He didn't do all that well down there, but sometimes, again, I say you don't want to overreact to AAA numbers for guys that sometimes they don't perform very well, but for whatever reason, they're ultimately needed back in the big league club, and Zack Thompson was, and then we're seeing a different version of him now that he's in the place where it matters. It's not to say that guys don't get up for those games down there, but it is just a different level of game speed. Still game speed, but it's not like pitching in the big leagues because nothing else is. But Zack Thompson was pitching in the big leagues today, and he was getting big league hitters out with all his weapons. So let me know what you think. Are you excited about Zack Thompson after this outing? Is that another guy you want to throw into that bucket, so to speak, of starting pitchers potentially that could be in line for opportunity heading into next year? The problem with that is I just don't know how you mix him back in to this rotation unless it's like a him or a Liberatore kind of thing at some point. But But I think the Cardinals want to get a long look at Liberatore as well. But here's the thing that you definitely do. Even if Zack Thompson is more of a reliever the rest of the way, and they can kind of be creative, I think, at times, like you could totally, it would be a little bit of a silly thing because you don't get the benefit of piggybacking and having the opponents have to look at a lefty and then a righty. If you were to piggyback Liberatore and Zack Thompson, though, two lefties, and let those guys pitch a full game, and that kind of allows the rest of your bullpen to kind of slot in and have hopefully like a day off. I feel like in a competitive season, you can't really do that kind of piggybacking thing. I never agree with it when fans go, oh, just piggyback. It's like, it doesn't really, it's hard to script that out because what if the first guy doesn't have it, or what if the second guy doesn't have it, and then you kind of expected that you could save your bullpen, and then suddenly you can't. Like, what goes wrong there? In a season that's off the rails anyway, I think it's a little bit more doable because the results don't matter as much. But I'm curious. I wonder what that would look like if they want to get more innings for Thompson to give him a real legit shot at being in that competition for next year. How might the Cardinals go about that the rest of the way? And you want to see Thompson with more starting opportunities. I say you can't look past Matthew Liberatore yet. Like, I wouldn't mail it in on him. Supposed to pitch on Thursday. I think he'll face Randy Arozarena Thursday in Tampa. That'll be a very interesting matchup. Of course, the fabled trade that took place that sent the outfielder to Tampa from St. Louis and brought the first-round pick Liberatore to the Cardinals. But as much as you do want to, I think, give him opportunities and see what he's all about the rest of the way, and I don't know if you can make a final decision on anybody at such a young age like Liberatore, but Thompson's only 24 years old as well, and maybe he's a guy that's, again, another first-round pick, deserving of the opportunity and as long of a look as the Cardinals can give him, I think, for a legitimate role next year. Like I've said, I don't know that you can necessarily trust anybody from this bucket to be kind of penciled in as we hope he takes command of the fifth spot in the rotation out of spring training, like whatever that competition looks like going into next February. I don't necessarily think the way the Cardinals can approach it in free agency and in the trade market is expecting one of those guys to grab the bull by the horns. I would like to see a competition for the number 6 starter, knowing that that guy's probably in your rotation based on whoever gets hurt between mid-February and the end of March. Like, that's kind of the way that I think it makes the most sense to handle it. You've got Michaelis and Matz. You sign 2 guys, trade for another one. That would be 5. And then you can have the Liberatores, the Hudsons, the Zack Thompsons. Do you want Helsley to start? Like, at that point, who gives a rip? Let everybody try it. Tell them all, though, going into the offseason, here's what we expect of you. And they've got to do that this time with Zack Thompson. Whether they get him more starts the rest of this year or not, they've got to go into next year and give that plan to Zack Thompson to say, hey, we like what we see from you in the limited sample that we've gotten at the big league level when you can go multiple innings, and we want to see you stretch out and come into spring training trying to win a spot. And then you can allow all those guys, and you can throw in the trade guys as well, like Kloffenstein, who looked good in his first AAA start since coming over from Toronto, and you can throw Sem Robertson in that conversation as well, who very much did not look good. I think he gave up like 11 hits and 8 runs in his AAA debut. Is what it is. Put that one behind you, and hopefully he ends up being a nice prospect. But DrewRom.com also is another guy that I think that is getting thrown into that AAA bucket. And so you can just look at all those guys and say, hey, come in. You're all starters. You're going to get looks, and you're going to pitch in Grapefruit League games. And, you know, one of you will know at the end of it who we really believe should slot in as that first injury replacement. But that's the way I would look at it. I wouldn't, unless you see one of these guys just go on a tear the rest of 2023, which leads you to go, okay, we've got a leader in the clubhouse, and we're confident enough that that's going to be the guy that wins this competition, wink, wink. Like, as long as he just doesn't completely blow up, we think his stuff is good enough that he can be that fifth starter. But to date, I haven't seen it. And people might say they should do the same thing with Matz's spot. No, Matz is in the rotation. I mean, they're paying him to be. We should ask a lot of this Cardinals front office and ownership in the offseason, but we're not going to ask to that level. Like, yeah, the $11 million lefty is going to come in and be part of a competition for the fifth starter spot. No, that's not what's going to happen. I've seen some discourse out there that suggests the Cardinals need to, you know, add enough guys to where that would be the case, but they're just that's not going to happen. Think in terms of, can they get 5 good ones, and then can the 6th one be somebody internal that you feel like can grab the bull by the horns, and when called upon because of an injury, you don't end up missing a whole lot as a result. I think that is the way that it should probably be approached. Is it realistic? It should be. What will they do? I don't I don't know. And so that's why it's even more important. If you don't have the faith in the front office to be as aggressive in free agency in the trade market as we all kind of think they need to be when it comes to the pitching rotation for next year, then certainly I think you're putting your money on guys like Zack Thompson and maybe Liberatore and others to hope that one of them can rise above and be a reliable number 5 starter. But like what's beautiful about a guy like Thompson is if he wins a rotation spot, his floor might be just get through and be our number 5. But his ceiling could be so much more than that. I'm not going to say his ceiling is an ace starter at the major league level, but I did pick him up in one of my dynasty fantasy baseball leagues today because I thought if he is in a rotation and he's striking out 8 guys like he did today, that's the stuff that, high-level major league starters are made of. So I think the potential is still there. The same potential they saw when they drafted him in 2019 with the 19th overall pick, it still exists, and now maybe it's just taking a little bit of time to come out, and we've seen flashes of Zack Thompson. Can that slider become more consistent, mixing in with the rest of his arsenal to make him a legitimate weapon for more than just an inning? Can he be a multi-inning threat, and beyond that, can he be a starting threat that can get you through 5 or 6, can turn over the lineup a couple of times? Is that a world in which Zack Thompson can reside? Because if it is, the Cardinals, I think, would have reason to feel a lot better about their starting rotation situation as it goes into next year. But let me know. Throw your comment out here on YouTube, youtube.com/@bschaeffer12. If you're listening on another avenue, head on to that URL and at least subscribe to the channel, Brenden Schaeffer, St. Louis Cardinals writer, where I'm a writer for KMOV, but I do a daily Cardinals podcast. And so you get a lot of insights from whether it's inside the clubhouse or whatever the case might be on a given day. I don't do the road trips this year. That's something I'm planning to do a little bit more of next year. I've got an 11-month baby at home, and next year he'll be a little older, and so maybe as a family we could go on some weekend trips. Would be kind of cool. Dad can work, mom and the kid can go hang out, whatever they want to do. We'll see. But this podcast, Be Safe Daily, is something that I continue or plan to continue throughout all of that. So would love to have you guys subscribe. It's been a really fun first 3 months or so on YouTube. I guess I got to realize April 1st to May to June to July. So we're over 3 months now of doing YouTube, but it's been a lot of fun hanging out, and we'll do some more live streams. I know people keep asking about the live streams. We'll get to those, rest assured, but make sure you guys are subscribed on YouTube. If you enjoy daily Cardinals content, that's the name of the game, because 30 minutes to 40 minutes to sometimes up to an hour, we're doing daily Cardinals podcasts, which end up going on YouTube as videos, and then some other videos that I'll throw out as I get a little bit more integrated. This is just a constantly evolving beast, and I appreciate you guys as listeners and watchers and Cardinals fans being along for the ride as we build this thing up. So thank you guys so much for listening. That is going to do it, though, for this edition of the show, and we'll talk to you next time. Cardinals off day Monday, so we'll probably throw something out there Monday night. Maybe I'll go with maybe like a Q&A or something. I don't know. If you've got questions for me, throw them out on the YouTube comment section, or you can tweet me at bschaeffer12, DM me on Twitter as well. But otherwise, appreciate you guys as always for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on Be Safe Daily. Peace.